uh, that doesn't mean it was mixed in my coffee.
Right. Right. Well, and I know that we're live now, so I just wanted to welcome everyone to our podcast that we have every Monday here, Fentanyl Facts and Stories. I want to welcome our guests today that we have on here. I want to thank Charlie, our co host, who always does an amazing job. So, today I wanted everyone to know that we are bringing some amazing people on here from Deputy Fire Chief Scott, who is from Massachusetts, who is in the black t shirt. We have Jerry up on the top, who is a director of High Point here in Massachusetts, who also has a lot of lived experience. We have the very famous Ron Muse, who does Texas documentaries around many fentanyl stories and families. And he's just doing amazing work. And I can see all of the Emmy Awards behind him. And I certainly have none. So we know who the rock star is. And we have our amazing mom, Michael, who lost her daughter, Gabby, at the age of 17 around the fentanyl being in marijuana. So this is something that I wanted to talk about because, as we all know, it continues to be a lot of pushback on this. And as everyone knows my story, this is how I lost my son. Gabby lost her daughter the same manner. But I wanted to bring the important people who can talk about this and really give you the stats, and even have Glenn speak about some of the naysayers that he's getting and he's hearing. So I think I really want to start with, why don't we start with you, Deputy, because I want people to hear, especially with you also not just being a deputy fire chief, but having the experience, seeing what you've seen with mass hazmat. What is some of the things you see, and do you have people telling you what we're hearing when they continuously say that fentanyl cannot be in marijuana?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things is I understand why people are so adamant against it. But if you look at one of the things DEA actually came out was fentanyl use in vape pens. So if you can use fentanyl in a vape pen, that means you can basically vaporize it into a thing. And I think the biggest problem right now that I've seen, I've just been to one recently, is a lot of vaping, other things being used in vaping. And they say, well, the vape pen only goes to a certain degree. It's not going to be high enough for the fentanyl to vaporize. Well, you can modify those vape pens. The other thing is, I don't have the specific dates on me, but Connecticut actually reported that. And I found about 6 or 7 YouTube videos throughout the country where they were talking about people who had lost ones to the fentanyl crisis. And I also found in psychiatrist.com, this must be a recent article. Like I said, I just saw this at the last minute, in my last minute fill in here. Fentanyl-laced marijuana use in adolescents, a rising concern. And this was dated February 6th of 2024. And this is from a group of Postgraduate Press Incorporated. So I'll have to do a little more search on that. So it's definitely out there. The biggest thing we see is poly labs on that. A lot of the mushroom psychedelics, along with the fentanyl, along with the marijuana. So not just pushing one drug. And I think one of the points that someone else brought on before was that why are we so concerned about the fentanyl being marijuana? I mean, we can have a scientist talk about that, the different temperatures at which it actually comes. And if you actually read about marijuana on the internet, they talk about how you actually roll your marijuana and what temperatures you get to best get the best high off of marijuana. And how if you don't have a certain temperature, you might not have that marijuana give you a good a high as you want. And again, I'm not an expert on this, but the interesting thing is that we're talking about different temperatures and how we bring that marijuana, THC, into our system and actually use it. So why isn't theoretically, you can actually say, hey, listen, if you're so concerned about temperatures and what temperatures are, from a scientific, and I'm not the scientific guy, we can figure this out. There's enough literature throughout the country, I think, that says this is a definite problem. But let's go past that and look at what the real problem is why are we using the marijuana? Why are kids so depressed nowadays? Let's get to the root cause of this so that we can make people healthier and prevent more deaths by keeping people healthy and happy. And I think that's where we're sort of missing the whole message when we start arguing about these things.
So let me ask you a question, Glenn, because of what you do and what you've been doing with Texas documentaries, and you were speaking before we went live, so I definitely want you to repeat it. what would be your messaging to the deputy fire chief after what you just heard?
We really need solid proof, like the ideal kind of proof. As far as I'm not challenging any of this here. We get tons of comments. We get about 1,200 comments a week, and a lot of those commenters defend marijuana and say that it's a myth that fentanyl can be in marijuana. And some conclusive proof, like where a law enforcement agency confiscated some weed, tested it, and found it to have fentanyl in it, that would be the ideal. And I've tried to find. I would love to find that, because our viewers need to hear that.
Actually, excuse me, but Connecticut actually did that. In Connecticut, there was a case on that. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
I can get you the. Like I said, I have the thing that I got off of Connecticut, but Connecticut actually did test it, and I can get you the information. I'll give it to Paula, and she can pass it on to you. I know there's very few cases where they've actually come up with this, but Connecticut was one of them. I think it's Bridgeport, maybe.
So, and I've actually tested some edibles from an individual that had enrolled at the MAP Academy in Plymouth, Massachusetts. This was almost a year ago now. The mom called me saying that, son is acting different. She is aware and doesn't approve of his cannabis consumption. Found a bag of gummies that you can tell were manufactured on the street. You can order these packets from Wish, Amazon, even, and individuals can manufacture these. And she brought them into my office. I put the whole bag in there, switched it around with some water, put a fentanyl testing strip in there. One line, it popped positive for fentanyl in a set of edibles from the street that were cannabis.
Yeah, so I actually found the article here. So this is November 23rd, 2021 from St. Vincent Medical Center. And they put out a release, state's first lab-confirmed case of marijuana with fentanyl, a deadly combination. So that's something made to look into a little bit more, as that there's a state lab actually saying that, not just, like I say, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, but you are hearing the stories. And I know the other thing I think that's sort of hurting the story is that the whole fear of fentanyl back in the day, about 3 or 4 years ago, if you touch it, you're gonna die, and that was false information. And because you have that out, they look at this, and it doesn't happen that often. So they're sort of like, well, are we in the same boat that we are before, where we're pushing out information that's really false? And if you want it to be false, it can. But I think that's probably where you start if you're looking for information. Like I said, I can send this article to Paula, but the Hartford's Healthcare, St. Vincent's Medical Center, and the state lab in Connecticut were the first ones that pushed it out, and that got pushed out to other people. And if you look into what they did, that probably helped start the conversation.
Well, that sounds like a great idea. Love to have a look at it. We are going to be in June. We are going to be doing some stories about cannabis-induced psychosis. Yep. And while we're doing that, we're going to be doing that in Denver. And while we're doing that, our hope is to find some cases that involve fentanyl as well. I don't know if hope is the right word, but our goal. We'll go with that.
Hey, Don.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. Paula stepped out of the video, and I just want to apologize to everybody. Normally, we're on StreamYard, which is up to 10 guests, and because I had difficulties with that earlier, I had to go back to my alternative, which was Restream. But if everyone's patient, we'll get to everybody. I truly, because I created this, I can't remove myself. I really like to have Paula on here so she can do some interacting. But I think everyone on here has been professional and been key speakers somewhere down the line. So it's not a problem with us messaging or getting the message off correctly. So, Michael, you stay there because you're very important. You're a mom, and I really need you to stay here. And Dawn, could you please introduce yourself and give us some kind of bio? And
Yeah, sure.
yeah, go ahead.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
So my name is Don Bover. I am currently the Director of Opioid Treatment Engagement for High Point Hub and Spoke. I've been working in the addiction field for about a decade now. I spent the previous 9 years as a substance abuse counselor, working my way up to assistant director, and then was offered the position with High Point. I spent the better part of my life really struggling with addiction myself, personal problems, in and out of the juvenile detention system, foster care, jail, state, and then eventually ended up in treatment. Wow. And so I spent the last almost 14 years, I guess, now in recovery and working in the field for almost a decade. So I've gotten to see both sides of this and just kind of how things are affecting the community for both perspectives.
Awesome. Great. I appreciate it. Jerry, I really want to get into your story and kind of let everybody know who you are. And if you can, just give us a story about you and me. I always try to make sure that I get stories out there, and Jerry has a fascinating story, and so I want to make sure that I get that out there. Okay, go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so my name is Jerry Randall, like you guys mentioned. So I am the owner and founder of Hardcore Connections. I'm also grateful to be a director at High Point Treatment Center and a person in long-term recovery, which is why I do what I do.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you, Charlie. Right. And this is coming from someone with multiple overdoses under their belts, and the majority of them were fentanyl related. So anything that I can do to kind of counteract that, provide much needed education and connection to resources is near and dear to my heart. And someone with multiple unsuccessful attempts at maintaining recovery, and buying into some of those stigmas that we're talking about, right? Let's circle back to this cannabis industry. It very much was on the marijuana maintenance, track for a long time there, but procuring it illegally, unaware of the risk involved with that. I've seen some individuals in my using days, that had unexpected reactions to a substance that they consumed. I'll put it that way. Granted, there's some individuals may be engaging in risky behaviors like myself, right? I would try to get away, from the opioids for a while, and would still continue to associate with the like-minded individuals, and would try to use other substances to cope, with my unhealed trauma, in my extensive history. I didn't realize that I needed to learn these things, to identify some of these triggers, healthy coping mechanisms, and more importantly, use them, and build that support network. A lot of the stuff that's out there is the stigma associated with addiction in itself, right? That it is a choice, and some of these things, and I the snapshot that I give for that to help people understand when I'm running groups and stuff, right? It says it on every pack of cigarettes: smoking causes cancer. It doesn't say may cause cancer anymore, it says it does, right? We still continue to smoke, knowing the potential risk, right? Now, if someone, God forbid, right, induces some type of lung cancer or something, we're not going to be like, shit, well, Jerry chose to smoke, right? Of course not. We're going to help and treat that individual, right? Why is this disease any different, right? Because of the stigma associated, and that's just it. It is stigma, right? And I now know stigma is lack of education. Right. Stigma is ignorance. Right. I used to think stigma is, they're just, never mind. I don't want to go into negative town on one podcast. This is live too. I watch my mouth. I quickly learned, that saying I didn't want to use isn't enough. Right. Saying I wasn't going to associate with these people isn't enough. Right. Saying that I'm going to use safely isn't enough unless I have this education and connection to these resources. Right. So I know you guys may not be familiar, but I very much promote harm reduction, right? Because very much as my using was progressive, right, in my disease, so was my recovery, right? Meaning doing my research and development phases and slowly but surely eliminating some of those risky behaviors, trying to use less and use as safely as possible when I felt like I needed to use, I use those as engagement tools, and I think that's what kind of sets us apart, from some of those other treatment modalities and mechanisms that are out there, right, is coming from a place of compassion and concern, so like I started using at a young age. You know, my first overdose, I was 21 years old. I didn't find recovery until I was 32. You know, so many years on and off the streets, homeless in Mass Ave, homeless in New Hampshire, homeless in Florida, right? Trying some unsuccessful attempts at those geographical cures, because I didn't know at that time, no matter where you are, there you are. And you bring your BS with you, you know, the stuff you address, you know, and I need to connect it to, you know, support mechanisms in the community that are going to meet me without judgment and with compassion. You know, it's like we're talking at the beginning of this call, you know, like I still don't understand the motive right behind trying to say like, no, it wasn't marijuana poisoned with fentanyl. They must have been engaging in some different substance or some other risky behaviors. I don't know. And that's not for me to make heads or tails of, but I know it's a reality. You know, I know from individuals that I've worked with and been in the field, I've worked in this field for almost 8 years now. You know, like Donnie, I was a clinician for a few years in an inpatient level of care before transitioning to outpatient and becoming a director. But I've seen it. You know, I've seen individuals, I've seen cannabis test positive for fentanyl. I've seen cocaine test positive for fentanyl. I've seen Xanax test positive for fentanyl. And amongst many other things, not just fentanyl, xylazine, metamidine, nitazine, right? The list goes on and on, some of these risky things, you know. Like I was sharing, is I know this individual, this was, like I said, a little bit about a year ago, that was consuming edibles that he was getting from a buddy. Right, his buddy, God knows where he was getting them, was manufacturing them, and somehow they got cross-contaminated, right? Because we're talking, it doesn't make sense from a fiscal standpoint, right? I don't think that they're intentionally lacing these cannabis products with fentanyl. I think it's a simple fact of cross-contamination. I'm thinking of myself back in my drug dealing days. I wasn't wearing a lab coat and had gloves on and, you know, and safely packaging everything. I was using my product, right? And not bagging stuff up this is the safe practices. So there was some cross contamination going on there. I wasn't sanitizing the Lysol and the scale in between products, you know. So there's very much opportunity for risk there, you know. But so my, God willing, last overdose, I didn't know it was fentanyl. I had this guy that was my dealer for a long time, right? It was known as the last brownstone dealer on the block, right? So it's supposed to be the last real heroin out there, which was not the case. You know, it was not the case. You know, it ended in an overdose. You know, my 3-year-old niece found me unconscious with a spike in my arm. You know, and that was my moment of surrender. Right. That was my moment of surrender. Right. I had exhausted all the resources outside of trying to work a program of recovery, because believe me, I tried, right, to see if it was possible, and it wasn't. Right. I could never gain that traction and the peace and serenity required, right, to maintain that, to find and maintain that daily reprieve, which is contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual well-being. You know, that only comes from working some type of program of recovery. It doesn't have to be fellowship based, doesn't have to be clinical based, but it's got to be something. It's got to be something, you know. So I upped my ante, you know, and decided to double down with the impact that I could try to have to get some of this needed information, because I never wanted an individual to share similar experiences to myself. A few of those overdoses could have been avoided, right? Could have been avoided had I had some connection to some of these resources, you know. More importantly, you know, testing supplies and, you know, safe harm reduction supplies, you know, got me in the field. So when I joined this field, said, how can I do the best that I can to get this information out there? You know, so we very much provide, you know, harm reduction education. I go out and speak anywhere and everywhere I'm called to, right? We hosted our lunch and learn today, which ironically enough, some of that topic was talking about cannabis laced fentanyl. It was literally just happened today, you know. It was coming out there, you know, because there's some of those misinformation out there that's not valid. You know, we heard Scott mention that there's labs out there. There's science and data to show that it is a thing, right? So now that we know that, where do we go from there? You know, so Annie, right, as Paula mentioned, I am a certified recovery coach. I'm a certified prevention specialist. I've done my late act training. You know, I've worked like I said, I've worked in this field for some time. You know, and I'm trained as a trainer in overdose education, you know, which is near and dear to my heart to get that information out there. You know, yeah, so I try to use some of my experiences, the negative and the positives, you know, to get out there, just to provide, to destigmatize. That's why I talk about my story, right? I put it out there to destigmatize it. You know, I am simply here today because Narcan exists, and not only did someone know about it, but they knew how to use it and weren't afraid to do so. You know, it's the most important.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, man. How long you want me to go for, Charlie? I can.
I'm gonna go I'm gonna go to Michael for a second, and only because I want her to tell her story,
Please.
and then I'm gonna let her go for the evening so I could try to get someone else on. Michael is a fascinating parent, and her daughter Gabby she lost, so I want to see what she's learned in since the 2 weeks we last talked. So, Michael, what's going on?
I have seen so many news outlets sharing that there's marijuana laced with fentanyl. People are dying still, and it's being reported on. The drugs have been tested, and it's coming back positive for fentanyl. But we still have people denying it, and it's really concerning whenever we have so many people out here that believe that marijuana is safe, and they've been lulled into this false sense of security, and it really does. It's something that I just couldn't imagine telling someone that it's okay to do that, and then they go out and they meet their demise. It's really important to get this education out here. This stuff is happening every day. My daughter passed away July the 19th of 2020 from marijuana laced with fentanyl, and I have been attacked by other people and believe it's happening. There was nothing in her stomach content. She had just eaten and her food was undigested. She didn't take a pill. I've seen officers on body cam where they would be inspecting a vehicle, and then it comes into the air and then they pass out and they can't breathe. I'm just wondering, maybe it could have been something like that, but she had marijuana in her system. So that's where the levels and everything just coincide, and it's hard to warn other people when we have so many saying that this is not happening.
Yeah, it's Michael, thank you, and I actually want you to return if you can next week on Monday, and please join us again. I'm gonna put Paula back on, or whoever's in the stage, on stage and backstage rather. And I also want to talk to Glenn. Glenn, I want to get a few more things from you, and if you don't mind, Michael, I'm gonna just remove you from the studio. But please,
it's a pleasure meeting all of you. Thank you for telling your stories. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you for sharing yours.
Yeah. Awesome. Great mom, man. It's a great person altogether. Let's see. All right, let's see. Glenn, why don't you? I want to go back to some of the things you were mentioning, and only because I missed it. Could you explain a little bit more to me? Because I think we missed a lot of what you were saying in the beginning, and thinking, Glenn, listening to Jerry and his story. How could you help out in a situation like that? With maybe you finding Jerry on the floor, and what would you do in this case as far as getting them support and all that?
To get him support if he's passed out on the floor?
Well, later on in talking to him, say you're his friend, what would you do? And you're still in the situation that you are now as an advocate. Trying to yeah, go ahead.
Once the crisis is resolved and they've been revived with naloxone, which is the active ingredient in Narcan, and a whole bunch of other equally effective options as well. In fact, I can even show them to you right there. I don't know if that's backwards to you guys, but
let's see.
Those are all equally effective options. There's even an option from Walgreens right there. But only one of those boxes says Narcan. Sorry, it's just just a pet peeve of mine. I have a marketing background, and I know what a victory it is for one pharmaceutical company when everybody uses the word Narcan to replace naloxone, which is the drug. Anyway, so I would urge that whatever materials left at the scene to be tested and have some confirmation. This ought to be a common knowledge thing. There ought to not be enough doubt out there to create any question about fentanyl being in marijuana. If it is, we ought to be able to easily find tons of examples.
Yes.
When we shot, we're working on a documentary that we shot in Anchorage. And while we were in Anchorage, we interviewed a DEA agent who talked extensively about how fentanyl is being put into weed. And then when they saw a draft of the program, DEA said, take all that out. And that's the DEA. And so we're really starved for good, solid evidence. When we put something on our channel about fentanyl in weed, a good portion of our audience just goes bananas. And a lot of the arguments are basically like a kid in middle school going, no, but there's a lot of response, and I am starved for a substantial amount of credible information that reinforces all that.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Where a big part of that challenge lies, if I might. I was thinking about, like you're saying, that you're going to need a ton of this data, right, and a ton of this substance to actual test. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of it we don't find out until after the fact, right? So, like, if I say I'm a drug dealer, right, and I maybe even been using, I'm chopping up some bags, right, and then I roll a blunt right where I was chopping up those bags, there might only be one little molecule or, microgram in that blunt or joint or bowl or whatever it is.
Right,
so
right.
some smoked that and then got poisoned. If we tested that after the fact, they consumed all the fentanyl that was in there. So I think it's hard to get ironclad data. I don't think we're going to be.
This is the challenge that our audience is putting to me. That's why I'm passing it on. That's where the skepticism in our audience, which is kind of a big audience, and it's frustrating. I keep looking for stories that will reinforce that. It's difficult and then having an experience like we had with the DEA, and it's a challenge to get our audience to embrace something, especially something that attacks their weed.
I think one of the things too is we don't always test. So from a public safety standpoint, a lot of times a decision is made: do I test it, or do we just say, you know what, whatever's going on, we just need to get rid of the weed. We need to get rid of this. We need to get rid of that. But I think the biggest argument is going back to it's multi-drug labs. We're not just seeing a marijuana lab. We're not just seeing this. And like Jerry said before, it goes, when he was doing this stuff, it was like there's tons of cross-contamination. They don't sit there and measure everything out, and they don't do all this. And the other thing I think when we argue over this stuff, it really loses the whole point of what we're trying to do. We're really trying to help people. And that if it's not going to be fentanyl, and we can block fentanyl and get off the streets completely, it's going to be another drug. And psychedelics is a big thing right now.
Exactly.
And then another thing is vaping. You can put all kinds of chemicals into vaping. The fentanyl can be put in vaping. That's pretty well established. And then in THC, you put in the marijuana you put in is not the same THC as when I was, I never smoked marijuana, but back in the 70s or whatever, Grateful Dead. This is not what it is. And like I said, I was just recently somewhere where there was a lot of hash oil being produced and a lot of vape pens all together in the same room. So they're really pushing that. And again, it's not going to be good stuff. It's not being processed properly. And there might be some medical benefits to marijuana. But again, any kind of medication, different people react differently to it. And if you're not doing it in a controlled environment with testing and making sure you're getting the right quantity, you're not going to know what you're getting, no matter what it is.
Exactly.
Sure. I totally get that. It is just this constant jump to the defense of their weed kind of reaction from a substantial number of our viewers.
This is the challenge.
And they also compare whenever we do that. Like we have, there's a story in our fentanyl series that's called "It's in the Weed," and the storyteller talks about how she lost her father to to a joint that had fentanyl in it, and in that case, it seemed more like a case of murder where the person who gave the guy the joint wanted that result. But just because of the title, tons of people reacted to that defensively. They called it clickbait. They compared it to what is that? Reefer Madness from the 50s or whenever Reefer Madness came out. Reefer Madness is
I remember that.
Hilarious and full of untrue information.
Because another article I found. Oh, sorry.
Feel free, anyone, Don, Jerry, Scott. I mean, you guys can jump in this conversation.
Yeah, so
it's an open conversation.
with,
like if we were in a living room or we were sitting somewhere in a meeting room, it's open for everyone to add.
And I kind of understand what Glenn's saying here. I believe that most of that comes from the belief that we're insinuating people are intentionally putting fentanyl in the marijuana supply as they're bagging it up and sending it out. And that's not what we're saying. It's accidental. At least I believe so anyway. And exactly from that. So I have a very extensive background with not doing the right things. Hence my many times into the DYS system at a young age, because I started using as well, very young, same as Jerry. And I learned by testing, and same thing. You never clean where you're working. So I don't believe somebody, and this is just my opinion on it. And there are people out there who may be intentionally putting fentanyl into marijuana, but I don't think it's intentional. And I think that that's where the message is kind of mixed up, because people are assuming we're saying that people are poisoning your marijuana, don't use marijuana. There are plenty of dispensaries around that you can get safe, clean products legally, and that they're coming from a safe vendor versus going to somebody down the street who's growing some in their backyard, who might be practicing something, in their basement where they're packaging all this stuff.
Yeah, so true.
Well, I think if I can step in, everyone has seen what I've been putting in the link. And Don, thank you so much for being on. Jerry, Glenn, Scott, all of you. I think what we need to make sure that the messaging is one where, and I think, and I definitely don't want to push back, Don, on you, but I think with what we're seeing with the cartels, they are doing everything because they want to. They are doing it purposely. This is why we've lost.
Yep. And again, that's a very that is a very intentional aspect of that, and absolutely. Exactly. But when you look at your common Joe Schmo who's getting things from somewhere, I don't think that that's the case. That's necessarily what's being, what's being portrayed. But from your standpoint, oh, absolutely. And again, sick people do sick things just to do them, and it's not excusable whatsoever. You know what I mean? And yeah, if you figure out a good way, Paula, to attack the cartels with this, you let me know.
go, Paul.
If I do, I might not be here. So
Yeah. I think the point to hit home on, all right, is regardless of how it's getting, it's in there, right? It's in there. And where do we go from there? Right. It's about providing this education. And just like Dawn said, right, I'm not co-signing using by any means. People get this twisted all the time, but I do promote harm reduction. Right. So, I mean, if you are going to consume cannabis, no one's trying to take your weed away. Right. And go to a dispensary and get it. And the way I look at that, that's back in like prohibition days. Right. Could you go get a bottle of bathtub gin and maybe go blind? Sure. Right. You know, could you go somewhere else and get it from the store and have a lower risk? Absolutely. Right. You know, so regardless of the motive, right, I see that, you know, population reduction, you know, there's whole lots of, you know, one can speculate for days as to the motive, right, you know, but I think the reality is that we need to hit that it is happening. It is having a negative effect on our community, right? It's hurting people's lives, right? You know, in worst case, it's ending them, right? How do we get better from here, right? It's about letting everyone know, destigmatize the fake news. It's in there. It's in cannabis. Don't make heads or tails of it, right? Or, you know, or mixing, you know, comparing apples to oranges here. I think people focusing on the wrong things, you know, like, no, your child must have been using a pill or must have been using something else. It wasn't the cannabis. And I don't, like I said, I don't want to get on that soapbox. I don't understand the motive. It gets me hot just thinking about it, you know, but the reality is,
well, I think the motive is defending their drug of choice. I think it's really that simple. They don't. There's a lot of users out there who don't want to believe that marijuana could be adulterated in any kind of way. One of their big defenses of marijuana is that, well, it's natural, and no, I realize it isn't. Even marijuana from dispensaries, it is genetically engineered to be far more potent than what was around when I was in high school.
It's the same as cigarettes.
It's wild, Glenn. You're talking 7 to 10% average in the 70s. I was talking this conversation with my dad about a couple of years ago. You know, high times from 78, it was 7 to 14%. Now you can get 92%. You can get flower pre-rolls 50 plus percent these days, which is a completely different beast, you know. And I think the thing that needs it, no one's trying to bag on the weed or their substance of choice, right? But you didn't see that go plant to bag, right? So unless you're aware of that production process, start to finish, there's an opportunity for risk and an opportunity for safety measures to be broken. You know, so those are less and less.
Even the testing that happens before a product gets to a dispensary, it's so poorly regulated that it isn't really trustable. So I've been told.
In some cases, yeah. But Scott, I think you had something to say.
No, I was just going to say, I think it goes back to, and I think this is where a lot of discussion gets missed, is look at our food supply, look at cigarettes. You know, when you're smoking cigarettes back in the 1800s, you're smoking plant leaf. Now what are you smoking? You're smoking chemicals. So no matter whether it's fentanyl, marijuana, whatever it is, industry has put a lot of chemicals into this stuff that's bad for us. I think it makes it more addictive. We have more problems. I think the most important thing is to learn from people who have gone through recovery. Where are the success stories? You know, where did people come from? Really listen to people's stories and where the success was and what wasn't successful. I've been an EMT back in the 90s when it was mainly heroin. That was pretty much all you did was heroin for overdoses, and all the meth was out west. So again, if you start to separate this whole thing of, it doesn't matter, it's meth, cocaine, whatever that toxic stuff is, and then what we do is we enhance the toxicity of it because it's done illegally and people are just going to throw whatever chemicals they can in it. And the biggest thing I see that I was affected by with my son was the vaping. You know, the vaping is started out as it's going to get you off cigarettes. Well, no, it's not. It's going to make it a lot worse. So if you look at an example like that, is why was vape? My generation, smoking was almost gone. It was almost out the door. Back in the 90s, it was really going down. People smoked here and there, but pretty much they had a whole campaign. And all of a sudden, whoa, wait a minute, we got to make some money. So now we're going to push this vape, and we're going to make it safe, but then we'll slowly add things to it. But we have to really look at history and understand what we're actually getting for a product, no matter what that product is, and then say, why is that happening? Because you can take all the fentanyl away from that. If there's a wave of magic wand, get rid of all the fentanyl. the cartel and anyone else is going to find something else that's going to replace the fentanyl in 10 or 15 years.
Right. And the other thing too is, Glenn, just to let you know, when I mean, if we look back 3 years, and I'm going to use me as the example, no one else. 3 years ago, when I lost my son, and I was telling people he had xylazine in his system, I was being told I was crazy. There was no possible way. You're crazy. You don't know what you're saying. And a year and a half later, xylazine is in every freaking street drug out there in the United States today. To where, and not just the DOJ, the DEA, FBI, Homeland Security, Secret Service, you name it, they are screaming it from the rooftops. So, what we continue to see, it's just when fentanyl came out in the pills, they didn't believe it. That's not true. They're not, no, you're wrong. The college kids are not dying from fentanyl and Adderall or their Percocets that they just got. No, they are. So what we continue to see, and I think the messaging for everyone is from all of us, right? Because all of you are the experts in this, and you're all bringing something to the table, is regardless of if people want to believe it or not, the science doesn't lie. Just like the science didn't lie about the xylazine, just like the science didn't lie when it was fentanyl. I mean, Scott can tell you when we've started talking, Scott was seeing fentanyl here in the area back in 2017, I think you told me, 2016. And only years later did it really hit the mainstream as it is today.
And one of the history lessons you have to learn about this is with the fentanyl, all these drugs that are coming up, these were things that were all created back in the 50s and 60s. And one of the first things that happened with fentanyl is the cartels got good, the Chinese got good, and say, okay, well, I'll take one molecule and I'm going to switch it a little bit. So I make it like an isomer. I take one molecule off. So by doing that, now it's not technically fentanyl. So they had to change the laws so that the law says if you have a chemical structure similar to this, then it's a fentanyl analog. But there's over 1,200 different analogs for fentanyls. And there's all these other drugs that the chemist just basically, if this is illegal, then I just twist it a little this way on my bonds and chemicals. It has the same effect. It could be a little bit worse. It could be not as good, but it still does what it's trying to do. And I can still
a lot of that
profit.
A lot of that comes from way back when they were doing with cocaine and heroin. And a lot of the lawmakers and were getting smarter to kind of add that, what you're talking about, the bond. Because I remember they were throwing a lot of it away and putting in water, and for conviction is we took the whole container, a whole bucket full, whether it was getting flushed down the toilet, and whatever that weighed, that's how much they were getting charged. And it was so that's just they lived and learned. And so what you're talking about is lawmakers that are living and learning. And prosecutors, how we could basically prosecute people, and because they were getting away with it some way, shape, or form. So glad you mentioned that, Scott.
And just to piggyback on what Paula was saying there,
Glenn, just to let you know, sorry, and Jerry and Don, and Scott, you already know this, but Charlie is a former police officer after 30 years. So when I partner with people, I partner with, as you can see, all of important people and all of you, because I want folks to understand that when we do things, we want people to understand that we're bringing to you people who have seen this, who have done it. I mean, Scott has been on many calls here in Massachusetts with fentanyl, where he's finding the big tubs of them, and then he's calling me and be like, hey, I can tell you the story now because it was on the news, and Jerry having the lived experience that he had, and Dawn, and now you, Glenn, listening to all these parents and the families. I think the messaging from all of us to you, and even Michael when she was on, is we just want you to know, Glenn, that you have a support system in all of us.
Yeah, you do.
You want facts, we're going to bring them to you, because this is happening. And for people to continue, I mean, if I were to tell you what I'm told many times by people, your head would spin, because I've been told that I need to go into a loony bin. I need to go to a crazy house. My son didn't pass away that way. I just don't want to tell the truth. You know,
I didn't mean to put that on the internet that you needed.
I'm sure you hear that. We hear the same kind of thing from maybe not a lot, but quite a few of the storytellers that we still are connected with. Virtually all of our storytellers, and there's about 300 of them now, and they tell us pretty regularly that they're surprised at how harsh some of the commenters can be on our channel, and it's when it happens, it still means people are getting the message. They're not agreeing with it, but friction means something's being accomplished.
Yeah, so there's interaction there. That
even those negative comments are important. A lot of times with the negative comments that we see on our channel, the commenter, you know, they're missing something. But what stands out is that the commenter will make comments about the story, about the content, and quote specific things from near the end of the story. So they watched the whole thing. It's all bouncing around in their heads. And even if they don't agree with it right now, it's in their heads. Mm-hmm. And it creeps up on them. The big thing that stands out to me, it kind of seems like an elephant in the room, is finding a better way to address demand.
I agree 100%. I think that's the biggest.
Yeah.
Because everyone's
if we do something, if demand went away, supply wouldn't matter. None of it would matter. Fentanyl could be on the streets, and if there was no demand, it wouldn't matter. So I want to see more of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I wanted to let Jerry and Don know, as well as the rest of you. We guys also we have a series of addiction recovery stories on our channel as well. It's not just fentanyl poisoning. There's a series of about 40 stories. We shoot them at the same time as we shoot the fentanyl stories. We also see people in recovery and they tell us their story. So if you guys haven't seen that, you might find some of them interesting. We have one that's going to be published later this week that is, it's just bizarre. Just
get the information. And so I want to touch on real quick too. Sorry to interrupt there, Charlie.
No, go ahead, Jerry. I'm going to go ahead.
So just kind of what Paula was saying.
Done. Sorry.
Trends start somewhere, right? Yeah. They don't just miraculously appear out of nowhere and all of a sudden it's a trend. So these things they pop up periodically and they seem like outliers. And so people might see it as like a situation that happens so rare that it's so bizarre that it absolutely can't possibly be true. And then it happens more frequently. And then it ramps up and it becomes regular. And at that point, then people are like, oh, okay, well, now I believe it because it's there. All trends start somewhere, right? Yeah. And we've seen it with everything that's come along. So this is something that, unfortunately, can very quickly become a trend. And so I think it's important that we get the information out there about, and again, it's the same as Jerry, like I'm not advocating for using it in any way. I'm a believer in harm reduction as well. Be safe, find safer options, talk with people, discuss these things because it's important information to have out there.
You know what keeps coming to my brain, Donnie? I haven't even watched Men in Black in some time, right? When James Earl Jones is sitting with Will Smith there, and he's like, a few hundred years ago, we knew the earth was flat. Up until yesterday, you knew that we were alone on this planet, right? So up until about a year ago, we knew that fentanyl can't get in cannabis, right? Imagine what we'll know tomorrow. We know this to be a thing now. Yeah. So like as we go, these things that we think we know You know, like you're saying, Tony, it's more and more becomes a trend, you know, and the information gets out there. We start talking, having these conversations, you know, and like Glenn hit the nail on the head, right? Whether the conversation is in there, whether they agree with it or not, you can't deny it, right? And then the more you start hearing it, the more you get emails from Paula, right? You believe it. Right, like, all right, this is reality, right? We got people with tenure here, with lived experience. We got chiefs of fire department, ex-police department. You know, like these people have lived experience from different perspectives that corroborate the same thing, that it is in fact a reality. It is in fact happening. You know, so until we can get on par for that, you know, huge prevention and education, right? Because Glenn, I hope that I'm alive for a world when there is no demand anymore. We know enough about risky use. We know enough about these substances, so we won't do it, right? You know, I am hopeful very much, and I'm going to continue to be a champion for that myself, whatever the heck I can do to provide that prevention and education until we get there, you know, but to try to destigmatize some of the fake news that's out there as well, you know, about this stuff, you know, that and have because the negative stigma has just as much a negative impact too as, you know, some positive stigmas may. You know?
So true. See, I just want to tell everyone that this is a great podcast, definitely worthwhile. I could tell you that, you know, YouTube and Facebook, definitely viewing and listen to everyone. The life skills on this board is tremendous. I'm an author also. I like writing and writing books, and you know, if I could sit down with all of you and write a book, I definitely have a bestseller. And believe it or not, you guys also should be thinking about writing books, ebooks, something. You know, record your own voice from time to time and get that going, because I think that everywhere you go, you see someone with some kind of earbuds on, listening to something, right? Why not it be your story or what you're doing? And as far as advocacy, yeah, it's tremendous. There's not a day that I'm not listening to some kind of audio somewhere, including this one. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be driving, you know, to Plymouth, Massachusetts, up and back, you know, 4 times, and I'm always listening to something. I put it on a Bluetooth and I listen all the way up, all the way back.
Plymouth, Charlie, we got to connect, bud. I'm in Plymouth too, man.
I was gonna say, stop by.
Yeah, I'm there every day, Monday through Friday, and I definitely, you know, it's good, you know, but it's probably going to come to an end come May, because my student is he's aging out. I mean, he's 21, and I can't drive him to school anymore. So I told his mother I'm going to buy him a Bud Light, and on our last day, she said, "What?" And I said, "I'm only joking. But anyways, I'm close by. I'm just in New Bedford, Massachusetts, wherever you guys are. If I can reach out and drive to you, I just buy that medium hot coffee from Dunkin' and make my trip to you. And but also, I want to give you a constant invite, a lifetime invite. If you want to come on the podcast, something's going on. Jerry, you got something you want to say. Dawn, you have something to say. Scott, Glenn, you have anything to say? Paula always has something to say, so I just put her on it. You know, please just come on, man. Just send me an invite. Connect with me on Facebook. It's Charlie Perry, and please, let's keep this going. Let's keep this friendship going and build on it. You know, been retired six years, actually. Wow, 7 years. And but you know what? My inbox is full. People think I'm still on the law enforcement. I say, wait a minute, I'm not getting paid. I wish I was, you know. Pay rate's a whole lot higher now. I definitely wouldn't mind, but I'm proud of my career, but I don't want to go back.
Well, gee, Charlie, you know, we've done a lot of work with law enforcement.
Yeah.
A lot. I have my own bulletproof vest. It was issued to me by the Houston Police Department. It is so cool. When I put it on, I get taller. Now, my IQ goes down a little bit, but I get taller, so it seems kind of like a fair trade.
Just don't let it get you braver when you put that thing on, you know.
Well, that's it. That's the IQ going down. Is it makes you brave. It makes you feel like you're bulletproof.
Yeah.
When I talk to students, I use the bulletproof vest as a metaphor for where they're at in their growth. I've done presentations in high schools and middle schools, and I talk about having the vest and how it makes you feel bulletproof, much the way high school students, junior high students feel all the time anyway.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share that because I had the vest. If it was closer, I'd show you.
Yeah. It's I actually won a lot of battles with my mouth. Verbal judo has been magnificent with me, and I've done so much with it. Communication, that's why people still call me now. And I love people. I'm a good humanitarian, and that's why I'm here to pass on the message. Paula, any last words? Knowing you, I'm just going to put you in the middle of the screen here because I know I can't keep you quiet. But
yes,
really. No, I just want to thank everyone for being on. Because I think this is so important. And Glenn, thank you for being on last minute. You're a rock star.
yes.
And Glenn's like, well, I don't know. Hold on. You mean you want me on? Hold on. In 27 minutes? I'm like, yep, 27 minutes.
Yeah.
And here we are.
And Jerry and Don, thank you.
5 stars for everyone, man.
And
5
Scott,
stars.
absolutely.
And
Yes.
Michael too. I know she's listening. Michael's
she's listening. Because we can't, again, we have to do this more often, right? People need to hear the messaging. One of the things that we all agree on and believe in is the messaging, the prevention of all of this. All of us know that we can't snap our finger and make it go away tomorrow. Unfortunately, drugs has been here for 50 years now, and it's something different all the time. And we continue to lose innocent lives. And it's the supply, like we all talked about. It's the supply. It's the mental health aspect of this. It's really getting the kids early for them to understand that, vaping is not sexy. Like I'm constantly told by 9 and 7-year-olds, hey, Miss Paula, it's sexy. Like, no, it's not.
No.
And Scott and I did an event not too long ago at the Boys and Girls Club, and a lot of the kids there vaped and they smoked marijuana. And, I think it's just really making the kids, the young adults understand, or not even young adults, because some of them are 7, that this is not good for you. And truly understanding the mental health of it, because I think that's another thing that we don't talk enough about, because there's trauma. There's a lot of trauma going on right now. There's PTSD every time you turn on the TV. There's a lot of regurgitating trauma, as I call it. And that's not even being tackled. And I think even with like Jerry and Don in the substance use, field, you both see a lot of it. You see a lot of it, and not just with your lived experience, but you see it in the new people that are now part of the substance use, right? And trying to help them, and the disease. And Scott, we talk about this all the time, you and I, and how do we stop it? How do we get it to where people don't want to go to the corner, don't want to go on Snapchat and get it from someone and say, hey, well, I don't got that Adderall. I got to study for a test. I need something to keep me up. And then they're gone tomorrow and their parents are burying them. So the messaging is definitely the prevention, always coming together. I definitely want to do more of this because I think it's so important. And Glenn, I love having you on because you are such a pillar in everything you're doing. And Glenn, you don't have to do what you do.
Yeah.
You've never had to pick up the baton and say, this is what I'm going to do for parents. And you decided to. So for that, I humbly thank you, because you're getting our messages and our stories out. And you could have said, you know what, I'm going to go to Aruba and I'll send you guys a picture. And you didn't. And I thank you for that. And the parents, that you have had on, I'm sure, thank you. And I keep telling you, we got to get you freaking here to Massachusetts.
Just say when.
That's it.
Well, you know, within reason. But Massachusetts is on our list.
Yes, we definitely got to get you here to Massachusetts. And when we do, we'll have Jerry, Don, Scott, obviously Charlie, and I'll see if I can get some of the parents here in Massachusetts. Because that's the other thing, too, is that a lot of the parents don't want to talk about this. And we talked about it right in the beginning, and I'm not going to take too much time on it, but it's the stigma. You know, it's the stigma of, and Charlie and I see it a lot here in our city of 100,000 people, when we see someone has passed away at an early age, 20, 30, young person, all of a sudden, you know, oh, they passed away in their sleep unexpectedly.
Yeah.
Well, we already know what that is. And they don't want to talk about it. And that's where we have to get people to talk about it. You know, I tell my son's story all the time. And look, I've been I told you, I've been told I need to go to a mental institution. I've been told I'm not telling you. You know, we're not asking you. You know, I've been told I was at an event where there was a DEA agent there, and he said that this is absolutely true. And there was someone going back and forth with me where that DEA agent had to almost kick this guy out because he was going back and forth with me to a point of where he was getting kicked out by the sheriffs that were there at my event. So I think it's, you know, it's okay if you don't want to believe something, but that doesn't mean you have to be, excuse the language, a effing asshole about it either. Because what we are not doing, all of the parents like me, we're not coming and saying to them, well, your child didn't die from a pill. You're lying. Well, your child didn't die from coke. You're lying. We're not doing that. So it should not be done to us.
I think Charlie has a good point. I think my big philosophy in life basically is we need to learn from the history. We really have to go back and understand the history of this whole problem, because I think too many people don't. When people start talking about the Narcan and stuff like that, and people are like, oh, this brand new drug, I'm like, this is not a brand new drug. I was using it back in the 90s, been used in the 80s. And these drugs, oh, where'd this fentanyl come from? It was discovered back in the 60s there. Like, let's if we forget about history, we just keep on repeating it. And I think we have to really get these stories out. I think it's important to get everyone's story out, because you can learn from everybody. Everyone brings something to the table that we can learn from. Because like I say, I haven't had an addiction problem. I've had food addiction problems. I've had other, but I haven't been in your shoes. So I can't say this is the best way to treat something. And having been through life and stuff, I always see, especially in medicine and psychiatric medicine too, is there's no one thing, one pill that's going to fix problems. Because too many times we try to pigeonhole, let's just do this for everybody. Well, that doesn't work for everybody. In this case, stories can help someone else. So if one person does something, that might help me, but it's not going to help Paula. If someone else has another story, that might help Paula, and vice versa type of thing. So I really think we need to sit back and really look at what's going on in the last 25, 30 years, learn from everyone, get the stories out there, and then put a solution to those problems.
Yes, I agree.
And to that point, the main thing with this is, you know, compassion and empathy, right? For me, it's not. It doesn't really matter the what as much as the why, right? When I hear people are ODing on whatever substance it might be, my first question isn't, "Oh, what was it?" You know, it's like a why. Why were they in that situation in the first place? Are there things they could be doing better? You know, what was the support network like? Is, you know, compassion and empathy go a long way, especially in this field. Because what we see is a lot of people, including, and I can speak from personal experience. I was a knucklehead up until my last bid in state prison. And it took an individual going out of her way to just show me compassion and empathy when I had never known that. And she helped me and sat with me and just spoke with me and listened honestly most of the time, with no judgment, and just honestly wanted to see me get better. It took that for me to finally open up and to start pursuing some course of treatment. And I feel like if we can, maybe instead of looking at the what were you using, why, you know, let's talk about why. You know, compassion, empathy in this field, compassion, empathy for people in general is kind of what the focus should be.
Exactly.
You know, hug each other. You know, hug everybody. Don't the hate doesn't do anything but foster more hate. And kind of to Scott's point, right? I think that's kind of the point. if we can forget about history and the things that have already happened, then we'll just repeat them. We'll call it something different. We'll label it something different. You know, and that's just kind of been the progression of this, you know, substance abuse issue has been, you know, from prohibition, alcohol, right, weed. I mean, marijuana. They used to sell opium over the counter. It used to be on shelves in stores. You know what I mean? It's been around for a long time. We just label it something different and stigmatize it to a point where people feel ashamed bringing it up or talking about their experiences. And to Paula's point, like, that's a lot of what happens. These individuals lose somebody close to them, their kids. I mean, God forbid. I'm a father of 3 myself. I couldn't possibly imagine putting myself in that situation.
Yeah.
Talking about things like that is why it's important, because this knowledge needs to be out there, right? We have to be able to support each other and lean on each other, not spread hate and tell people that they're wrong or, you know, invalidate what they're going through. All it does is close doors when we should be opening them. You know?
So true. I want to let everyone know that, you know, I'm involved with 3 different podcasts. This one, the Really Charlie podcast, and Frequency Live. So there's 3 different platforms that you can use just by contacting me. WNB1 Radio, I'm in their studio sometimes, and every Sunday I'm in their studio, and most of the time on Monday and Tuesday I'm doing it from home. But feel free, you know, get in touch with me, and I gladly could you know, start from A to Z with your stories and highlight you, give you your flowers while you're standing, as I say, each and every one of you. And I like to do that. It's very important that we put video out there, you know, so someone could see when we're not around. You know, clicking on a YouTube video is very long. It's an educational thing. So if you want to be on video, please call Paula and I gladly put you on, and it doesn't matter. I could do a podcast every day if I wanted to. So if we have to do it at 8 p.m., we have to do it at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., just let me know. I'll do it, you know.
Are you up that early? Because you're old, so I don't know how long you stay.
Listen,
there's
something. See, there's something wrong with that lady. You know, blondes are supposed to be, you know, kind of a little flaky or something, but she's crazy. She's definitely crazy. You know, it's
they say blondes have more fun.
Yeah.
Right. He knows that.
Yeah. So God bless everyone here. You know, I don't know if it's spiritual, but God bless everyone. And if you ever need me, get a hold of me, Paula, and I gladly put you on this podcast. Anytime, any place.
Yes, thank you everyone for being on. You guys have been wonderful. Sorry that we kept you on so long, but this was important, impactful, and so much needed for the community to hear, because as Charlie said, we're on YouTube, Spotify, Twitch, Instagram, Facebook. So this is going to be heard by many people, and it's needed. And this is one of many, because this is not over. And Glenn, you're going to be back even more times, and we're going to get you here to Massachusetts to have a lobster roll.
That is the plan. It is on our list.
Yeah, and it's from.
And I'll give you some skills, Glenn, so you can feel tired in Massachusetts.
Hey, this is great. I definitely can't wait to see the comments later on and the interaction from other people.
But I'd like to link to this on our channel.
Anytime, man.
However I find the link, to link to it on YouTube to another YouTube channel. I know how to do that. I just need to know what channel to look for.
Really Charlie podcast.
And will this be available? Is it live now?
It's live now, and it's available now. Yep.
So it'll be available as soon as we close.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'll try to find it. Might not happen until tomorrow because I'm old too.
Paula got a lot of nerve. I hope.
Yeah, I know.
I hope. I
You
don't
know,
know.
hey, I'm not that young. I'm not a spring chicken. Okay,
Yeah, I know.
Age is earned, people.
It's in
Age
your
is
name.
earned.
Young is in your name.
Yes,
Yeah.
I will forever be young. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Forever
was a
Young.
good-
That's not a Tina Turner song.
There you got
No,
the hair. You saw the hair. You saw the hair earlier.
Yeah, she'll be walking around the neighborhood with a Tina Turner skirt too.
I don't know if
But,
I can do that because you've seen me. I don't know. Yeah. You know,
just a couple of weeks ago, you was a Girl Scout, with your Girl Scout cookies and making a dozen sales or so.
yeah, my granddaughter did well. In fact,
Yeah.
she did so well. She says, "I'm done with Girl Scouts." She was number 2. She's like, "I'm done, Bubba.
Say,
Thanks for selling all the Girl Scouts." Scott bought some too.
Yeah, go out in second place. I get it.
She went out in second place. She said she's all done. She said that's what she wanted to do it for.
Hey.
To sell the cookies, and she's
She
Hey,
wanted
if you have
that
a goal and you reach it,
Yeah, that's right.
Hanging up the sash, man. Hanging up the sash.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Glenn,
Take
thank
care,
you.
and
everyone, Scott, Jerry, Don, thank you. And Scott, we will stay in touch. Jerry and Don, you and I are talking on Friday about what we're about to do. And Glenn, you have my number. If you can't find the link, please give me a call. I work from home tomorrow.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
So do I.
Well, for those articles tomorrow.
Texas Pictures World Headquarters.
Oh yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night. All right.
Good night.
All right, everyone. Fabulous guest on Fentanyl Facts and Stories. Please continue to join us on Mondays, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time here on Facebook and YouTube. Also, we are on LinkedIn and Spotify. This particular week, we're just going to share the video later on to LinkedIn and Spotify. So I will be doing that. But thank you. Outstanding guests. Their life experience is amazing. And that's why we call it Fentanyl Facts and Stories. All right. I will see you next week. Tomorrow night, we'll be on the Really Charlie podcast. And at this point right now, it's just going to be you and I on the Really Charlie podcast tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So I will see you tomorrow. All right. Take care. God bless.